Who is most responsible for this happening?
What I would say is that the Secret Service is responsible for the protection of the former president.
So the buck stops with you?
The buck stops with me. I am the director of the Secret Service. It was unacceptable, and it's something that shouldn't happen again.
The President and Homeland Security Secretary said today they had 100% confidence in you, but there are some members of Congress calling on you to resign.
I appreciate the Secretary's comments, and we're going to continue to be transparent and communicate with people.
Do you plan to stay on? Absolutely.
I do plan to stay on.
Are you, though? I mean, to me, I got questions, especially when I see like stuff like this. Like there's a piece that just came out from Washington Post where they're citing that SWAT teams from the jurisdiction of Butler County, according to the DA there, Richard Goldinger, was saying that Secret Service was in charge. It was their responsibility. It's their job. And he says they're trying to blame local law enforcement for this, and they're passing the blame. I mean, no matter how you look at it, it is an absolute mess. And then, why was there hesitation? I have so many questions on this. And then obviously we have the situation with Alec Baldwin, which is getting buried with all of this. Joining us now via Skype, a legal mind that I very much respect. You can find him on X at Law Self-Defense. Andrew Branca, who is an attorney. He is an author of The Law of Self-Defense. And he says his pronouns are U.S. Constitution. He joins us now via Skype. Good to see you, my friend. I appreciate you joining us on this. I want to get kind of your just overall thought on the lapse of diligence. And apparently there is, I don't know how we can even approach accountability because no one wants to really seem to take actual responsibility for this because, you have Cheadle saying this, but then it's like all these leaks keep pushing it to local law enforcement.
I mean, of course, it's nothing new, right? I know you're too young to remember this, but I can remember when Janet Reno accepted full responsibility for Waco, burning men, women, and children to the ground, but of course kept her job, right? They all say the buck stops with me, but nothing's going to happen. Nothing will change. I won't be held accountable in any meaningful way. It's the same old story with these bureaucratic hacks.
Yeah, very much so. Where was because there's a lot of discussion today about sloped roofs. I'm sure you've heard this. Cheadle was saying in this interview with ABC that, we didn't want to put Secret Service up there because the roof was slightly sloped, which seemed to be like the same kind of slight slope that the counter snipers were on already. I didn't realize that slightly sloped rooftops, Andrew, were more of a risk than taking a bullet for the president.
It's insane. And of course, that's the balancing they're trying to do now because they completely dropped the ball on every level. The sloped roof, the lack of response, the minutes that they knew somebody was up on that roof, the response of the Secret Service afterwards. You saw the footage, I'm sure, of them putting Trump into the SUV and those female Secret Service agents that she didn't know how to holster her gun. She was trying to holster her gun into her badge. It was ridiculous.
It was an absolute mess. And then, of course, the stories about how apparently the building that the killer climbed on top of was the staging area for, I guess, local law enforcement tactical or tactical response. And then there were police snipers inside of that building. So, how does where does the allowance come in here? They hear something. Where are those shots coming from? Or the counter snipers see it. At what point do they see that's a threat? We're going to take it out. Do they got to run it up the flagpole or do they got to wait till the guy fires?
It's so insane that if this were a movie script, no one would believe it. It would have to be a farce of a movie, right?
Yeah, it would be. So what is the legal protocol for that? Obviously I'm not an attorney. You are. I don't know if they have to go and call it like, we got a threat up here. Can I take the shot? Or if they have the discretion to do that. I would think, you trust them to be able to be in these positions. And that's sort of like a consent to exercising that discretion if they see that threat by nature of them being in those positions. How does that work?
Well, we need to distinguish between the law, what the law allows, and whatever their policy may be. Their policies could be completely inane. But if what matters is the life of the president and the president be elected, the law allows for them to use deadly force in defense of the president or any other innocent person the moment they reasonably perceive an imminent deadly force threat to that innocent person. That means they don't have to wait for a shot to be fired by the bad guy first. That means they don't have to be certain he's a bad guy. They could be wrong. It just has to be reasonably perceived as a deadly force threat. And we've seen the photos of this guy on the roof. He does not look like a tactical police officer. Long hair, stringy, AR on a rooftop by a president. I'm sorry, even if it turns out later, if you shot him and it turns out he was just some innocent person, He looks like someone who's about to take a shot at the president of the United States.
Yeah.
You're allowed to use deadly defensive force instantly. You don't have to call anybody. You don't have to check. You don't have to deconflict. You don't have to worry about the slope of the roof. You just take that shot.
The local law enforcement officer that apparently climbed up and looked up at the guy until the killer turned around and pointed his rifle at him, and then I guess he ducked back down. I would like to think that if I were in that situation, I would have fired at him. But then that local cop, considering what police have been going through, I mean, I guess I can understand some of the hesitancy there.
Yeah. So what if it turns out to be, some kid from the community who's not maybe mentally all together and just climbs up on the roof, something he does all the time. And maybe this cop doesn't know that, right? He's not familiar with the neighborhood, whatever the case may be. And it turns out to be an awful shooting. Lawful, but awful shooting, right? Tragic, didn't actually need to happen. But I'm sorry, those are the calls we pay police officers and Secret Service to make.
That's a great point. And when they say things like, well, that rooftop that was 147 yards away from where the former president was positioned, that's out of our perimeter. That makes me not have any faith in them making those calls, Andrew. I have no faith in them.
It's nonsense. So if any normal person, a bystander in that crowd had been armed, and I'm not saying people at a presidential speech should be armed, but I'm saying if they had been armed for whatever reason, they would have been privileged to shoot that gunman without having to worry about a perimeter, without having to call anybody for permission, because any of us can use deadly defensive force to protect an innocent person from a deadly force threat.
That's a really good point because, and we're talking with Andrew Branca, Law Self-Defense on X. That's a really good point because there were something like 50 some odd bystanders who saw this guy. They watched him climb up in the roof and they could tell that it wasn't right. And then that's when they started yelling at law enforcement. So ultimately, if they had perceived that guy as, as threatening as they clearly did, and if they would have shot at him, they would have been in the clear.
Yeah, well, they would have been legally justified in doing that. What the criminal justice system decides to do, put you to the test.
Right.
That's a whole other question, right? We see wrongful prosecutions, we see Rittenhouse, so you're taking a legal risk there, but you're within the legal boundaries for the use of defensive force.
That's very interesting because, and I like that you bring up, the kind of the punitive prosecution, like these political witch hunts that take place because, people like stop and check themselves like, ooh, do I really, they're like weighing out what's the consequence of me doing this, even if I'm completely justified in doing so. I mean, they really are trying to make people afraid of defense.
They are. They use the process as the punishment, even if you're so clearly within the legal limits that no rational jury could ever convict you. They do what they did to George Zimmerman or Kyle Rittenhouse, and they make you spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in a legal defense. And there's always a risk of conviction. No matter how innocent you are, there's noise in the system. Innocent people get convicted. It doesn't mean it's just, but it means it's something that could happen. And this is something people do need to think about when they're contemplating using force.
Unless you're Alec Baldwin, which brings me to that whole story. Now, I understand that case. The state withheld evidence, which to me, and obviously you're the legal expert here, to me it kind of seemed like an open and shut involuntary manslaughter case. Like
it was, and still is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was, but the state withheld evidence and then it's dismissed. And I guess double jeopardy is applicable here and he can't be retried, or is there a civil component?
Well, I mean, in theory, the dismissal was a ruling of law by the judge. So it's subject to appeal. So it's not double jeopardy in the sense that it's absolutely over. I don't expect it to be appealed, though. I expect as a practical matter, it's over. What I actually don't understand this ruling by this judge. So everyone reacts reflectively to, they hid evidence, Brady evidence. And I'm a criminal defense attorney, so Brady's very important to me. I'm not trying to diminish the importance of this. But properly understood, Brady should only apply to evidence that could make a difference in the case, not to irrelevant evidence or immaterial evidence. And to me, what Baldwin was charged with was his personal handling of a gun. He took what he knew to be a real gun, capable of firing real bullets. He says that. He pointed it directly at Helena Hutchins. No doubt about that. The bullet hit her directly. He cocked the hammer. He says that. And he pressed the trigger. Now, he denies he presses the trigger, but all the other evidence is consistent with the trigger being pressed. The source of the ammo is irrelevant to that claim of involuntary manslaughter. Imagine if he had killed Helena Hutchins, not with a gun, but with a car. I'm making this up as a hypothetical, but he got drunk. He was driving drunk on the set and he ran over and killed Helena Hutchins. and he got charged with involuntary manslaughter for running her over. Would we care where the gasoline in the car came from? It doesn't matter. It's immaterial to the criminal charge. So even if you believe the state hid the evidence, and I think there's waffle room there, but even if you believe that, so what? The source of the ammo can't possibly change the legal outcome in this case, because neither the criminal charge nor any of the legal defenses are based on where the ammo came from. It doesn't matter. If the ammo had come from a sporting goods store,
yeah,
what difference would it make?
That's a really great point, too. We're talking with Andrew Branca, Law Self-Defense on X. You can find him, attorneylawofselfdefense.com, too, is the website. Some were saying, Andrew, that the way what you were just discussing, that it seemed to them to be sort of orchestrated as a way to let him off the hook. Like it was such a weird reasoning and like a clumsy move by the state. I mean, do you put any like serious weight to accusations like that with us?
You know, I don't do mind reading, so I don't know what was going through people's heads. I think what might have happened here, or one real possibility, because I don't think Carrie Morrissey, the special prosecutor here, was evilly motivated.
Right.
I really don't. But people have to remember, she's never been a prosecutor before Hannah Gutierrez. She was a career criminal defense attorney. She just got appointed as a special prosecutor. So she's never had police working for her. She's never had that kind of administrative oversight. She's never been responsible for making sure she adhered to the Brady requirements for sharing evidence with the defense. She was always the recipient of evidence from the state, never the provider of evidence. And I think there might have been, incompetence is probably too strong a word, but unfamiliarity with the prosecutor's role, given that she's really never had it before. So she may have dropped the ball there in an administrative sense. So I don't attribute malice to her or really a conspiracy theory here. But again, my bottom line is no one's ever been able to explain to me why the source of the ammo would matter to this charge of involuntary manslaughter. I don't get it. And all I hear people say is Brady material, Brady material. Well, Brady's important. If this could have made a difference, absolutely, Brady material. But I don't see how it could have.
That's a really good point, too, because it is. I mean, the issue isn't where he got the ammo. It's how he was handling the firearm, which is
Right.
a completely separate issue. It's sad. So, and as you said, it looks like it's not going to get appealed. So ultimately for him, he's like free to go.
I think so, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's privilege right there. Privilege that, other people aren't afforded. Good heavens. Andrew Branca at Law Self-Defense on X, and you can find his website, Law of Self-Defense. I suggest you get his book. Andrew, always appreciate your perspective.
Hey, glad to be here.